Alright, basically what we're going to be going over in this video is the Kobra 3 Max. One of its big weak points is the Z-couplers are plastic for whatever reason, and they seem to have incorporated some kind of spring in it, I guess, to be anti-backlash. But anybody with a little bit of experience in it knows if it's going to actually be an anti-backlash system, it's got to be able to support the weight of the gantry with that spring in order for it to push against both sides of the thread effectively. And that's just not going to happen with a printed the size of the Kobra 3 Max. So not only that, they made it plastic, which is something that supports the entire gantry against a metal screw, and is constantly moving up and down, especially with how unlevel they are and how much compensation the bed leveling has to do the entire time it's printing. I mean, common sense tells you that's not a great idea and it's going to wear out quickly. Not only that, it only moves in 2 axes, so if that rod's a little off, it binds, and that's what gives you the weird layer lines, which is actually feed banding, and it's just overall a bad idea. So the solution for me and many others has been Oldham couplers, which are the brass or copper or metallic design that replaces that, which already is better just because it's metallic. So we'll be going over the Oldham couplers and also thrust washers, which take the weight of the gantry off of the shaft of the motor. There's debate whether it matters. If we're taking it apart, we're going to go ahead and do that too. That being said, we're also going to take apart the entire machine in this video and readjust everything and make sure everything's square. The less compensation the software has to do for automatic bed leveling, the better it is. So the more mechanically level it is, the better your quality is going to be. That's just a given. So that being said, if you're not comfortable taking stuff apart or tinkering with stuff, it might not be for you. I'm not responsible if you can't get this thing back together, but I can definitely show you how to take it apart. And that's what we're going to get into, and it worked great for me. Hopefully it works great for you. Alright, so we're starting out. First thing you're going to want to do, obviously, if you've been maintaining it correctly, is get all the excess grease and whatnot you have built up around the bottom of the lead screws before you start messing with it, getting everything greasy. And after that, take whatever you can find. Happen to have a paper towel roll right here. Get your bed a little centered. And just use the belt at the top and just lower it down till it about sets on there like that. That way when you start unhooking stuff, it won't just fall down and hurt your bed. Alright, so once you have something supporting the gantry, not really crushing it, just have it set down enough so that it's not going to fall and hurt anything. We're going to go ahead and get the print head out of the way just so that there's less weight on it. There's If you installed it out of the box, you know how to do this. There's 2 bolts above the wheels and then 2 down there underneath the motor. And that should let the whole print head assembly come off. And yes, an electric screwdriver is your best friend doing anything like this. Alright, now I'm going to take these bolts. I like to keep them in order, whatever they were on. When I take it off, I just sort of stack it over here. You don't really want to mix them up because they're all different sizes. I'm going to switch this up. And there's 2 plastic caps on the top of each of the gantry arms. We're going to want to take those off so that we can free the timing belt. And you sort of hold the belt, the rod is stuck in a bearing, so make sure this middle bar comes off with it. Just go ahead and get that removed. Then we can just go ahead and pop off the timing belt. Place that over here. Make sure all the corresponding screws end up with it, same area, so we don't lose track of them. Alright, this next part is strictly going to be making sure everything is lined up right, adjusted right, gantries level, all that kind of stuff, because these things are honestly thrown together pretty haphazardly at the factory, and nothing's really ever right, and they pretty much depend on the bed leveling feature to make up for that, because this can be a little cocked and that can be a little cocked, and basically the bed level will move your print head up and down to compensate for that, but that just adds more complexity to an already pretty poorly designed Z-axis, and that's what gives you a lot of the binding and the layer lines and all that. The more you can get this all lined up and true to itself and level without relying on the bed leveling, the better it overall is. Because bed leveling is great, but you don't want this to be doing this the whole time, just moving around the plate, or at least to be doing it as minimally as possible. So the first step is going to be over here on the stepper motor. Go ahead and bust that plastic cover off. I've already disconnected this wire. Keep that over here. We can just let that hang for now. And over here is where the tensioner is. It's a spring tensioner. It has two bolts, top and bottom, that hold the assembly on, and this littler one in the middle is what holds your spring tension. So we'll pop that one out first. That way it gives us a little play back and forth in the belt before we remove the actual belt. Then we'll come over here. And just gently sort of pull in. You basically just want to pop the belt off of the print head carrier, damaging it as little as possible. Yeah, once you got that done, go ahead and pop the other side off as well. And we can take the two bolts that hold the housing on. Again, keeping them all in the same area, not to get lost. And you see when this housing comes off, there's going to be a spring mechanism in it. Careful, as you pull this middle part out, you don't want to drop them two little springs. Now you can go ahead and take them springs off. Pull the belt out, pull it all the way out. Set that aside. And now what you're going to want to do is go ahead and the carrier, see, I can already tell it's a little rough. There's a way to adjust it and a test we'll get into when I put it back together that lets you know you got the perfect tension, but it is nice that it doesn't wobble. But there's a screw right here on the far side of the print head that has to be removed. Basically what that does is it keeps it from flying right off the end. And right now that's what we want it to do. So go ahead and slide it off the end. Just by the way that popped off, I can tell it's on there way too tight. And then there's a screw through this little hole on either side, and these two right here, which hold the crossbar of the gantry on. We're going to go ahead and pop them off. I like doing the ones through the holes first, just because I can get them out without worrying about the bar falling. Then you can sort of support it a lot easier while you get these out afterwards. Set the crossbar aside. Make sure all of its little screws are with it so we can keep track of them. And now we'll get into removing the old crappy, I don't know what they were thinking, making a part that's such high wear and supports the entire weight of a giant gantry out of plastic, but that's besides the point. Alright, so there's a few different ways to do this, and the previous videos I watched for the regular K don't do it this way. But basically I'm going to complete the installation of the thrust washers before I continue. Because while this is all assembled, you can use this weight to seat it correctly while you tighten that coupling. Because the whole point of the thrust bearing is to hold the weight of the gantry so that it's not on the shaft of the motor, which lets the motor worry about this instead of being pushed down while it's trying to do that. So we'll go ahead and take just the bottom of this coupling loose, just a little bit. You can see it fall. We'll do the same with the other side. You don't gotta take it out. Just try to make it loose so that it moves around. And these are linked below. They are 3-piece thrust washers. And basically what we'll do is we'll pull that up off of there and just sort of cock it to the side a little bit without hurting it too much. Not quite. What we're going to do is we're going to put the bottom piece down in there. Make it so it sits on the face of the motor. Then, while we're here, the middle piece, I always make sure to leave them up pretty good. You probably won't have to do this as maintenance, but it certainly doesn't hurt to do it now. And I just use super lube, lithium grease, or silicone grease. Then you follow up with the top. So now you've got all 3 pieces of one bearing. And instead of using a spacer, they have spacers you can print, put up the right height. I think it puts it too tall. The kit comes with like 10 of them, so I just put 2 of them in there, and it ends up at about the right height. So once you got the first 3 pieces installed, just repeat what you just did again. Move it up a little bit. The middle piece at least. And follow up with the top piece. And now you can put the Z-rod back on. And since you haven't taken it all apart yet, it'll keep it set down on there, and that's what you want. When you tighten this bottom screw, you want the weight to be on the thrust bearings and not on the rod via the screw. So we'll go ahead and tighten down that bottom screw. You can help it a little bit pushing at the top, but go ahead and get that bottom piece nice and tight, but not too tight, because if it gets loose real quick, you're going to have bigger problems. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so I was going to show you all both sides in depth on that, but my camera died. So I assume you can take it from the other side. It was the same thing on this side. I think the only caveat that I added was that the thrust bearings, they're three pieces, the bottom piece, top piece, and a ball bearing in the middle. Just common sense, make sure the groove is always facing the ball bearing. So it'll be first one groove up, ball bearing, second one groove down, then another one groove up, then another ball bearing, then another one groove down. And that pretty much catches you up there. And you just tighten it back down to, effectively what we've done is transfer all of the weight of everything that is attached to the gantry from that rod to those thrust bearings that are sitting on the face of the motor. So now, all that motor has to worry about is what it's supposed to do, is spin that screw side to side and up and down. So now that we've got that set, we've got these tightened, make sure they're nice and tight, but not too tight. And then now we can go ahead and remove the top one of the coupling, which holds the Z screw on. Don't gotta take it out. Loosen it up pretty good. The top one. So now what we can do is we can pull that Z screw right out of it. Now basically just go ahead and unscrew it from the crappy ass plastic. There's a spring in it, so I think they were trying to do some kind of anti-torsion stuff, but if you've ever looked into anti-torsion, that spring would have to hold up the whole gantry for it to even kind of help. So that's a whole other deal. Now you've got this free floating. Go ahead and do it to the other side. Top screw. Pull it out. Support this. Go ahead and twist it up out and out of there. Set it down gently. I like to lay the screws on the corresponding sides again, just so you don't mix stuff up, because sometimes putting it back together, especially if you come back to it a day later, you don't really remember where all that crap is. So, now, just for a weight issue, we're going to go ahead and remove the stepper motor, which is 4 screws in the front. Just so that we can get a feel for the travel of this gantry. I mean, this machine worked perfectly. I've been printing on it 800 hours now. I've had 0 problems. Quality, obviously not great, but it works to most people's standards. And before I touch anything, I don't know if you can see that, but that is not great. Again, a printer that worked pretty well till the moment I took it apart. Let's go ahead and get that stepper out of the way. It's probably a little easier to see now, but that's not great. So, the other side doesn't have a stepper motor. Obviously we can skip that. And now we can divert our attention to this garbage Fisher Price plastic coupling. Go ahead and take that out of there. And I mean, you can see, this is a screw that through the entirety of your print, especially if it's not leveled right, is just constantly going up and down, and then obviously moving up for the levels and hopping up for Z-hop and all that. This is always a metal thing, constantly up and down, and Anycubic in all their genius made it out of plastic, because why not, right? And you can see it gives front and back movement but there's nothing side to side, which is probably where most of the binding comes in. You'll see when I demonstrate the Oldham couplings just what that eliminates. But basically, it's plastic on metal, doing this constantly, and maybe moving a little bit forward to back at best. So if the screw is bent, say, laterally a little bit, this thing doesn't move that way. It'll bind up, it'll hiccup, and it doesn't take much to squish away and create layer lines like you see in situations of V-bending. So go ahead and spin around to the other side. Pop this other piece of crap off. Keeping these screws over here. Throw it away. Okay, now we'll move on to the first step of adjusting, which is another core design. I have ordered a linear rail kit, which if you subscribe, I'll make eventually a video of the installation of that. But it basically takes these garbage rubber, not even rubber, plastic wheels, and it replaces them with a linear rail similar like you see on the print head of, say, a bamboo or something like that. And then the Z-axis rides on that like a fine-tuned machine. Instead of wobbling around on some wheels, you gotta screw closer to each other every once in a while. But you can see this is wobbly. You can hear it. This should be firm. It's wobbly. You should have gotten this wrench when you bought the printer, and on the inside wheel there's an eccentric nut. And as you're wobbling it, just figure out which way. In this case, turning it up takes that wobble away. So what we're going to want to do is keep wobbling it, and just with ever so slight adjustments. Now it's barely wobbling. A little more up. A tiny bit more up. I mean, I'm talking minute. And you want it to just where it stops wobbling it off. You don't want it too tight. Just the second you can do this and not hear it wobble, that's perfect. And now you can see it still moves up and down perfect, but it no longer has that wobble. And again, this printer worked fine and didn't wobble before I took it apart. But once you take it apart, you realize the bar is binding them, and even though they're not wobbling, they're not seated properly because they're bound up. Once you take it apart, you can see that they're not as tight as they may have seemed. So again, wobble it, going up again. So going up from the inside tightens it. Yeah, I might have gone too far, so come off a little bit. Loosen it a little bit more. And now I can just barely feel a side-to-side wobble in there. So I'll give it the tiniest little bit more. And just the second you can't really feel a wobble, that's perfect. You have just a little bit of resistance coming down, but otherwise it should be pretty. And now you've adjusted that at least. Alright, so now we'll get into it. The Oldham couplers. You've seen the original one, the plastic crap that it gives it a little leeway this way, but front and back. But if the rod's cocked this way a little bit, it's going to bind up. Basically what the Oldham coupler does is allow three-way movement. So no matter which way your rod might be bent, it'll give it that little leeway while still keeping it on the axis. And you can find these. They are on Amazon to where they already have the screw attached. So basically they'll have the threads already on it, and it's all one piece. And those are great if you're doing one machine. That's awesome. But these are cheaper, and these come in a 6-pack. So since I'm doing more than one machine, it just made sense to take the extra step. And add these on. Just like these, it's just an ender 3 trapezoidal screw. Don't drop this one. I dropped this one and I had to file it because the clearances on these are so close, which is what makes them good. I dropped it on the ground, it nicked the corner, and it didn't fit back together. So that was an issue. So don't drop those. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take her up. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and leave that in, and when I edit it, sort of funny. I dropped it. I was lucky it didn't land on one of the fine-tuned surfaces, thankfully. But basically what we're going to do, and it's important on this part, since it needs to move very fluidly, we're not going to use this stuff. This is good for the screws and the thrust bearings, but we're going to want to get this stuff. More of a liquidy, oil-based superlube. It's multi-use synthetic lightweight oil. It's easily available on Amazon, just like all of it. This is what I use on all my machines. But we're basically going to carefully, without dropping it, take the pieces apart. And we'll take this piece, get some oil on it, and we'll slide them back together. Again, they're very tight tolerances, but that's why they work so well. And this one will slide off sideways, and we'll get some oil on that. You probably don't need to do this, but I don't believe it's going to hurt, and I wouldn't put them on without doing that. So the next step, we need to identify one of these sides is going to be no threads, and one of them is going to have threads in it. The thread side is going to be what's up, facing up, and connects to the bracket on your printer. So we're going to go to the side without threads. We're going to go ahead and slip that off. And then you can place this, the trapezoidal screw. The long side is going to be sticking out the bottom, and the shorter side will fit in there, just like that. And we're going to take the screws provided. Again, this is another step. It's probably not necessary, but I'm going to do it, so I wouldn't do it any other way. Get some blue thread locker and lock tight, whatever you want to call it. Just get a little bit on the end. This basically just prevents the screw from backing out on you. And you're going to want to go from the inside of the Oldham coupler into the trapezoidal screw. You probably want to do this one by hand. Just snug it up in there. Should use the smaller screws that came with the Oldham, and it shouldn't really protrude much. Don't tighten it, just get it a little snug. I'll go ahead and get the second screw, get a little bit of blue goo on there. Get that in there. And this one might feel a little rough, just because they're cheap parts. Holes don't always line up very well, but it goes in there. Now that you've got both in and almost snug, then you can go ahead. You don't got to crank on them. Get them nice and tight. And now you have connected the trapezoidal screw to the Oldham. Since I probably wiped a bunch of it off, I'm going to put a little more oil on there. Then I'm going to put it back together. And now you can see we have the Oldham nice and oiled, moving freely, with the trapezoidal screw on there. And again, you can spend, I don't know, it's like, let's say maybe $5 a piece doing it this way. But you can get this piece with that already attached. It's actually one piece with the bottom. Probably I'd say it's easier. I wouldn't say it's better. I don't think there's much of a difference between either one. But if you want less work, that would probably be the way to go. Alright, I spared you the pain of watching me do that twice. Just basically set them both up the same way. Now, what we're going to do is, this is a lot shorter than that, so it sort of works out. We can play with this without messing with the coupling. But basically what I'm going to do is take the longer screws that came with the Oldhams, if you bought the ones that I bought without the trapezoidal. Get a little bit of blue Loctite on there. Now remember, front and back screws. Hold it up there. Just get the back's easy to get to with your fingers. So get that screw started. Don't even snug it, just let it hang out there. And you can get the second screw, get a little bit of blue Loctite on it. Get that back one in there. Now this is not super important to line it up. I mean, the screws don't give it much play anyway. But the whole part of the Oldham couplers is so everything sort of meshes correctly. Allows it some movement, if you will. And then we'll sort of hold it in the middle as best we can. And snug them screws down. Go ahead and tighten them. Nice and tight, not too tight. And then we do that for the other side. Alright, I know I said do that for the other side, but I almost forgot an important step. On these machines, I mean, honestly, this may be why it's better than the two of them I had, because apparently it's a gamble buying these machines. But this, on my other machine, was tilted down. I had to bend it up a good bit, so you just get a regular square, and you hold it firm on this, and make sure it's square with this, which this one's honestly impressive. This is probably why this was the better of my two machines. Both of these sides are pretty good. But on my other one, it was more like this. And you can see a gap up here. So I basically took pliers and I carefully bent this up and down until I got it OCD perfect to where you can put a square on it. And it's pretty good. Because what happens is, if it's bent down a little bit, the higher it comes on the Z screw, it will eventually start to rub the screw on this little mount. So that's very important that this is a 90-degree angle between the face of this mount and the Z rail. Alright, now this isn't a problem I had with any of my machines, and I would hope nobody has the problem, but while I'm in here, I like to put my big square just behind this a little bit and just try and get a straight on look at it. And just make sure it's not horribly off. Front to back. And it's by no means has to be perfect, and it, in my experience, no means will be. But the problem is these adjustment rods, they only adjust in entire half turns. So if you're not considerably off by like well more than a quarter inch, you're very likely to make it worse trying to adjust this. So for that, I like to leave it up. The only time I like to leave it up to the manufacturers at Anycubic. Okay, so this is when you're going to have to start paying attention. Reassembly. So what I've done is I've just put some shop rags down to minimize taking up my deck. You see these two, they line up that right there. Actually, you probably see better than this. Basically what we're going to do is get this rail back on here. Inside screws only. Just get them in there and don't tighten them. Get them so they're a little snug and stack them up a little bit. Allow them to move around in there. Now with them nice, loose, and moving around, you're going to need something, and this was where it gets important, because again, bed leveling will adjust for anything that's off. With this, obviously, that's what it does, but once it gets past a certain degree, it's going to fail leveling, and you really want that to do as little as possible, because all that's doing is moving this up and down the entire time you're moving across the bed. The straighter and leveler you can get all this stuff, and the less that does, the more quality you're going to have, obviously. So, now that we got that out, I'm going to get this out because I want my straight edge, get a nice straight edge. I have a nice aluminum level, nice and straight, and I want to lay that magnet up. And I want to lay my gantry rail on that, nice and even. You want to look so you can see light through it. Basically, you want that to be nice and level. What this is basically doing is setting the gantry up level with the bed for the most part. And now, I like to lift these up a little bit on each side and just make sure they're nicely centered. You'll see that they're probably going to be too low. Just pick them up so they're nicely centered in there. And just snug them. Do not tighten them yet. Just snug them down. Make sure they're both relatively centered in where they're both two on the rail. And that's where we're going to go ahead and take our Z-rods, and we're going to go ahead and thread them into the Oldham couplers. Don't force them, nice and easy. Get them down in there, and just for right now, just get them so they're barely inserted into the coupling. And do that for both sides. Now they're just barely inserted. You're going to want to have the wrench ready for the coupling side. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to twist them down into that coupling. You're going to want to watch. The moment that you see it starts to lift the gantry, I mean this is important, literally. The moment it starts to move, you want to be basically right before it starts to move. And you can be real touchy with this, it'll help you. It's going to be right before it starts to move. Or right as it's beginning to move without it moving. And then go ahead and tighten your top coupling down. Now when that's tight, the second you turn it, it should move the gantry. And do that same thing for the other side. Screw it down in there. Second it starts to move it, but right before it does, go ahead and tighten that gantry. And mess that up. Now the second I twist it, it's lifting. Now to make sure those are nice and tight, in the final setting, Make sure it still sits nice and level. Now this is the part I had to improvise and find out which way works for me. The Kobra 3, there's videos on this, there's information on how to set this. I didn't find anything specific to the Max because it has stepper motors on each side. The Kobra 3 has its way to set it right with the slayer. But since each side has a motor, I do, again, basically, so it's just barely lifting them. Still looks real good on the level, and we're going to adjust that again anyway. And then we can go ahead and slide our timing belts on. And the notches might move them a little bit, make us off level, but we'll adjust that later. But we basically want to get them timed with each other about as level as we can with this. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the timing belt back on. Be careful not to spin them. They'll bend inwards, and you can get them on pretty well. But when you put the caps on, they're going to adjust, and they might turn a little bit and mess all this up. So go ahead and get the bigger Allen. Find our top bar. Now I usually start with this side, and there's a bearing up there. You're going to want to get this rod to pop in, and then that's sit down on here. You do this one side at a time. So I always come to the side away from the screen for whatever reason. I'm sure it doesn't matter. And I'll get that just snug down. No reason to get it super tight just yet. And then on this side again, this is where you do your tension. Get that slipped into the bearing. And then onto the rod. And that, I mean, there really isn't much adjusting. By the time you get those in there, it's tight every time I do it. But now you got the belt in there. Those are all set. And now you can go ahead and tighten these down. You might very well have to take that off again, but it's better to tighten them down now than to forget to tighten them later. Don't ask me how I know. Alright, so now we're going to basically adjust for whatever little bit aligning the timing marks up change. You can come down here, and I mean, it still looks pretty good. But I'm going to loosen these bolts on the rail. And that's basically going to let it settle down onto my level at exactly. They might be a little off from each other now that the belt's on, but now the rail is going to make up for that and still sit perfectly parallel to the bed. So I'll loosen those up, let the rails sit down, and I'll snug them. I'm not tightening them just yet. Just snug the inside bolts on the rail. A little more snug, get them so it's not going to move. Then it looks pretty good. This side might be a little high. Push down a little bit on that. Now it looks pretty good. Now I think we can go ahead and put the outside bolts in. The reason I said don't quite tighten those yet is because sometimes these won't quite line up. I got lucky. You snug it, get them both started before you tighten any of them. Before you tighten any single bolt, you want all four of them at least started. That's enough. Check the level one more time. Because again, the better you are at this, the less your auto leveling has to do throughout every single one of your imprints and entire process. And the less chance you have of having to take it back apart because you didn't quite get it right, and then the auto leveling fails on you. Now we can go ahead and tighten all these up. Starting with the inside one, and the outside one. So now we should be able to use the belt and move that up and down relatively easily, but it should do so in a pretty level fashion. And it looks pretty good. Alright, so now we'll get into setting up the print head. I'm going to bring it up a little bit with the belt. Now, go ahead and slide it on. Double roll the side to the top. But this way, obviously. Do that on purpose to test it. Make sure the wheels are lined up good. And you can see right away, I had it too tight. I mean, you really gotta pop it on there. So I'll take this thing again, get it on that eccentric nut, and loosen it up until it slides on real nice. Now you can see it's sliding pretty good. Honestly, there's almost no wobble already. I got lucky. Loosen it up a bit, you can see the wobble. Tighten it. You can see the wobble go away. Moves pretty good. And luckily there's an actual way to test this one. If we set the print head up towards us and lift the machine at about a 20 or 30 degree angle, we want to see it just barely slide down. That means it's, I mean honestly, maybe because I've done that twice, but that was pretty perfect right off the bat. And then you'll go ahead and put that screw you removed from the back of it in. Right here. This is basically just what keeps it from flying off. I don't know why it's there, but I knew it took me a second to figure out it was there when the head wouldn't come off. So then after that, this is set pretty good. It moves, not crazy. You can push it down with firm pressure, but not very easily. This slides smoothly, no bumps or hiccups. When you put it towards you and lift the machine, it'll slowly slide. That's about as good as it gets for that. Now we can put the stepper motor back on, which plug facing the bottom, and just go ahead and bolt that back on. Again, always get them all started before you tighten any of them down. That goes with anything you do. Once they're all started, you snug them all, crisscross, then you can give them their final tightness. Make sure everything's lined up. You tighten one of the first bolts, by the time you get to the last one, it doesn't line up because it's cocked a little bit. So get that back on there. And now we'll move to replacing the print head belt. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and replace the print head belt. And I tried to leave it a lot like it was when we took it off. Short end over here, and we got the long end on the top. And there's a middle hole. You could probably tell if you use your machine, it's got belt dust all up in it. And we're pretty much just going to feed the belt through that. And it'll come out the other side. Make sure it's nice and straight. Mine seems to be flipped over in there somewhere. Okay, so it's nice and straight. Just going to lay it over, stepping leather over there, and we'll draw this side in. Now we've got to put the tensioner back through. So, do that. I'll see if I can do it while actually showing you. Put the springs back on the little nubbies. Make sure it's lined up right. Obviously this is your filament cutter, so it would sit like this. And with the part that's going through on the top, it's going to be hard to show you guys. You want to slide this in here with the belt coming through here, but then you want the springs to go in there. So now when you pull on the belt, the springs push off here, and that's basically what tensions it. So we get the belt from over here. Basically get that push right on and clip back in. Now you want to make sure on the bottom here, this belt has to be up. How? Let me show you that. There's a groove. It needs to be up in there, directly under where it goes to the top, where you're going to pinch it, like I just did. Yeah, once it's up in there, you'll be able to get the plastic piece back on. Hopefully a lot smoother than that one. Now we'll get these two bolts started. Started, not tightened. I'll go ahead and snug them. Just fairly snug them. Now we can come to this side. Make sure it's facing the right way. Lay that one down there. And make sure to come around the stepper motor and then up into that same channel above the bottom rail of the gantry. Again, all this dumb crap you could probably find on the wiki, but I gotta do it, so I might as well explain it. Now remember, we did not put in or tighten the bolt that keeps the spring moving to make this a little easier. Get that one on. And it should be tight. And we can try and get that one over. Flip it in on there. Now we got that connected again. Now we can go ahead and tighten the little screw on the spring. And we can give that one a nice tighten. And don't forget to tighten these. Nothing too crazy. Nice and tight. Got some pretty good tension there. And it moves back and forth pretty well. So, looks good. Alright, now we're on the home stretch. So, pretty self-explanatory. Just pop that cover back on. Go ahead and get the stepper motor plugged back in down here. And now pretty much just put the print head back on. If you own this machine and you bought it new, you've probably done this before. 4 screws. Don't tighten any of them until all of them are in. Snug them all. And give them a nice little tight. Not too much, not too little. Now we've got our print head installed again. As of now, more or less, I'm not going to record it, but I had to tear my cable up, so I'm going to flip it over and replace that while I'm install this, but y'all don't need to worry about that. But more or less, you can sit back from afar, bring it down. It looks pretty good. So physically, it's reassembly. Usually what I like to do is I bring it all the way up with the belt. Don't do it too fast. Some people say the stepper motors can generate power and fry stuff. I guess we'll figure that out if that's true after what I just did. But I'll bring it all the way up. And then you want to make sure the rod's centered in those holes. That's why we bent them straight earlier. Sometimes when it gets up there, the rods will start rubbing on those holes. And then I just like to lube the whole shaft up. Printer shaft, that sounded pretty bad. But anyway. Not too much because it's just going to all get drugged down, clogged up on the bottom, which is basically what the first part of this video was cleaning that crap up, because I just did maintenance not long ago. But the fact that when you take it off it's black tells me it's removing stuff you don't want in there, so it clearly can't hurt. Just go ahead and wind it back down. You'll see it all. All clumping up. All that's excess. before it makes a big problem. You can wipe it off as you go down. But as you can see, it's already dark gray. So, waste a little grease to clean the rods, I guess. At least make sure there's enough on there. Don't get too much on the belt, like that is. But that's basically your reassembled frame with your pretty new rust bearings right there. Oldham couplers. And everything's set up pretty nicely. Alright, that pretty much wraps it up. The only problems you might run into after this is pretty much on most machines what happened after I did all this. I don't know if the initial bed level maybe comes down too hard because it's so different, because it's actually lined up properly now. But I have ran into bed leveling errors pretty consistently. Both machines. The first one cleared up, the second one's really stubborn. What ended up fixing it is the strain gauge. I actually was able to just take it apart and look at it. It's just basically a piece of aluminum that bends when the nozzle touches the plate, so it knows that it has touched the plate. And I pretty much just took all that apart, bent it back straight a little bit, and it worked pretty consistently after that, and it seems to get better the more times it levels. Almost like it needs to relearn that it's actually straight now. But worst case scenario, replace the strain gauge, maybe have one on hand. Honestly, it's a part that goes bad on these machines so often, it wouldn't hurt to have on hand. But once that's straightened out, run it through the full calibrations and all that, and it's been pretty spot on. I hope this helps.